Have you ever awakened in the middle of the night, looking around your familiar bedroom, and wonder how life changed so dramatically while you barely noticed? How things once so certain are now covered in the dust of time. How relationships you thought would never change have transformed into something you hardly recognize. If so, you've begun to encounter the harsh truths that accompany the privilege of growing older. Last week, I sat beside Thomas, a 78-year-old retired teacher. As we talked, his weathered hand suddenly gripped mine. His eyes filled with tears when he said, "Nobody warned me about this part aging, that I'd live long enough to watch everything I love slowly disappear. My wife of 50 years, my best friends, even my own strength. I wish someone had told me the truth sooner." The pain in his voice wasn't just sadness. It was a deep, soul-level ache that comes only from losses that can never be recovered. I've seen that same look in hundreds of eyes over the years. The shock of realizing that growing older means not just celebrating more birthdays, but saying more goodbyes. It's a universal heartache waiting for all of us lucky enough to reach our golden years. A heartache born from confronting truths everyone avoids discussing until they're living them. These aren't the truths you see in retirement commercials of smiling couples on beach walks. They're the 3 a.m. truths that wake you in darkness, demanding to be acknowledged. Today, I want to share with you 3 painful realities that every senior must eventually confront. These aren't comfortable topics for a Sunday conversation. They won't be featured in retirement brochures or celebration speeches. But understanding and accepting these truths isn't about surrendering to despair. It's about finding a path to genuine peace that can only come through facing reality exactly as it is, not as we wish it would be. Let's begin with the first and perhaps most difficult truth, a reality many of us are never prepared to face. Let me tell you about Margaret. At 73, she still lives in the same 2-story colonial where she raised her 4 children. Her walls are lined with family photos spanning decades. First steps, graduations, weddings, grandchildren. For over 40 years, she was a family anchor, the one everyone called first with news or when they needed advice. Her kitchen table hosted countless family meetings where important decisions were discussed. Her opinion wasn't just respected. It was sought after, essential. Last month, Margaret learned from a Facebook post that her youngest daughter had purchased a new home. No one had asked for her thoughts on the neighborhood, the financial implications, or whether it was the right move. When Margaret called to congratulate her daughter, she sensed a gentle resistance to her questions. "Mom, we got a handle?" Her daughter said kindly but firmly, "Try not to worry." "That's when it really hit me," Margaret told me, her eyes welling slightly. "I'm no longer central to their decision-making. I'm now someone to be updated, not consulted. And truthfully, that feels like a kind of invisibility I wasn't prepared for." This first harsh truth, that relationships with our adult children inevitably transform, strikes at the core of how many of us defined ourselves for decades. We build our lives around being needed, being essential, being the ones with answers. Then suddenly, sometimes gradually, sometimes overnight, the dynamic shifts. Our children develop their own expertise, form their own families, create decision-making units that function independently of us. The parent-child relationship that defined much of our adult lives undergoes a fundamental transformation. This shift happens for natural, healthy reasons. Our children establish their autonomy. As they should, they build lives that reflect their values and preferences, not necessarily ours. They develop relationships with partners who become their primary confidants. They face challenges unique to their generation that our experience doesn't always equip us to understand. The geographic dispersal of modern families means many of us see our children only occasionally rather than as part of daily life. Technology further complicates these relationships. Our children live in a digital world where communication happens constantly but often superficially. A quick text has replaced a long Sunday phone call. Video chats provide connection but can't replace the intimacy of shared physical space. Social media gives us glimpses into our children's lives, but often leaves us feeling more like spectators than participants. The pain of this transition is real and deserves acknowledgement. After decades of being a protector, the advisor, the essential presence. Being moved to a more peripheral role can feel like a profound loss of identity. Many seniors describe feeling blindsided by this shift, having never imagined that the children who once couldn't go to sleep without them might one day go months making major life decisions without their input. For Margaret, acceptance began with a difficult recognition. I realized I had two choices, she said. I could cling to my old role and create tension by inserting myself where I wasn't being invited, or I could embrace this new chapter and find ways to connect that respected the adults my children have become. This doesn't mean accepting neglect or disrespect. It means recognizing that healthy adult relationships with our children require adjusting our expectations. It means understanding that our children's independence is not rejection, but rather fulfillment of our most fundamental job as parents, raising self-sufficient humans. Margaret began by consciously shifting from expectation to appreciation. Instead of expecting to be consulted about decisions, she expressed genuine interest in hearing about choices after they were made. She practiced listening without immediately offering advice. She began to see her children's self-sufficiency not as a loss, but as evidence of her success as a parent. She also became more intentional about creating new kinds of connections. Rather than focusing on what was lost, she explored what was possible now. She suggested activities that allowed for quality time without pressure. Museum visits with her artistic daughter, attending baseball games with her sports-loving son. She found that when she stopped trying to maintain her old role, space opened for new, more equal relationships to develop. The strangest thing happened, Margaret reflected. When I stopped expecting them to need me in the old ways, I discovered they still needed me, just differently. They wanted my stories, my presence, my unconditional love, not my management or constant input. As we learn and navigate these changing family dynamics, we face another truth that's often even more challenging to accept. One that confronts us not just in our relationships with others, but in our most intimate relationship with ourselves. Robert never expected to be betrayed by his own body. At 81, the former marathon runner and high school track coach still remembers crossing the finish line of his last race at age 70. I wasn't setting any records, he laughs, but I finished, and I believe I'd keep running, even if I slowed down a bit each year. Then came the arthritis, severe enough to make even walking painful some days. A minor stroke affected his balance. Macular degeneration gradually dimmed the world around him. Despite decades of disciplined exercise, careful eating, and regular checkups, his body began imposing limitations he never imagined he'd face. I did everything right, Robert told me, frustration evident in his voice. No smoking, rarely drank, stayed fit my whole life. I thought I was buying myself a different kind of old age. But here I am, using a walker and asking for help with tasks I once did without thinking. It feels like a broken promise. This is the second harsh truth we must confront. No matter how well we've cared for our bodies, they will eventually begin to fail us. This biological reality is perhaps the cruelest aspect of aging because it often feels deeply personal. As if our bodies have turned against us, ignoring our wishes and efforts, operating according to their own diminishing agenda. The physical changes of aging affect us on multiple levels. On the practical level, they restrict activities we once enjoyed and complicate daily routines we once performed automatically. Tasks that were once simple, driving at night, opening a tight jar lid, climbing stairs, reading fine print, become challenging or impossible. The world literally shrinks as mobility decreases, sometimes confining us to fewer rooms in our homes, fewer destinations in our communities. But the impact goes far deeper than practical limitations. For many of us, our physical capabilities have been central to our identity. The strong father who could fix anything around the house. The grandmother whose holiday dinners were legendary. The friend always ready for a spontaneous road trip. When these capacities diminish, we don't just lose activities, we lose parts of how we defined ourselves for decades. Perhaps most frightening is the loss of independence. After a lifetime of self-sufficiency, the prospect of depending on others for basic needs strikes at our core sense of dignity. We worry about becoming burdens to our children or finding ourselves at the mercy of caregivers who can never know us as we once were. Robert's turning point came after a fall that left him housebound for weeks. During his recovery, a visiting nurse gently suggested he was fighting the wrong battle. She told me I was spending all my energy raging against what I couldn't change instead of adapting to what is, he recalled. She asked me a question I'll never forget. What if caring for your body now isn't about conquering it, but honoring it for all it's carried you through? This perspective shift, from battling against physical decline to honoring the body's journey, opened a path toward acceptance for Robert. He began distinguishing between what could be modified and what needed to be accommodated. He worked with physical therapists to maintain strength and balance within his new limitations. He redesigned his home environment to support his changing needs rather than constantly fighting against them. Most importantly, he expanded his sense of self beyond physical capability. I started asking myself what remains unchanged, what can't be taken by age, Robert said. My mind is still sharp. My capacity to appreciate beauty, to connect with others, to find meaning, none of that depends on how fast I can move or how much I can lift. For many seniors, this process of separating identity from physical ability becomes a spiritual journey. It challenges us to recognize that our essential worth has never been rooted in what our bodies can do, but in who we are at our core. Our wisdom, compassion, capacity for love, ability to find joy in simple moments. These qualities often deepen rather than diminish with age. This doesn't mean surrendering to decline without a fight. Proper nutrition, appropriate exercise, preventive health care, and an active mind remain vital. But it means engaging in these practices as acts of kindness toward the body rather than desperate attempts to control the uncontrollable. It means setting realistic expectations that allow for satisfaction rather than perpetual disappointment. I still have difficult days, Robert admits. Days when I'm angry that I can't do what I once did. But most mornings now, I wake up and thank my legs for still carrying me, my eyes for still letting me see my grandchildren's faces, my heart for still beating after 8 decades. It feels better to be grateful for what remains than bitter about what's gone. As we navigate the changing relationship with our bodies, we simultaneously face another painful reality, one that affects our connection not just with ourselves but with the community that has surrounded us throughout our lives. James carefully arranges 8 framed photographs on his mantle each morning, a ritual that has become both painful and sacred. Each frame holds the face of a dear friend, his poker buddies, his former colleagues, his next-door neighbor of 30 years. All gone now. At 85, James has attended more funerals in the past 5 years than family celebrations. Nobody warns you about this part, he told me quietly. When you're younger, you lose a grandparent, maybe a parent. It's devastating but expected. Then decades pass before death touches your life again. Suddenly in your 70s and 80s, it's like a terrible roll call, month after month, year after year. The people who shared your history, who knew you when, who understood your references and jokes without explanation, they disappear. And with each loss, a piece of your world goes too. This is perhaps the harshest truth of aging. As we live longer, we will inevitably witness the departure of many who made our lives meaningful. Friends, siblings, partners, sometimes even children. The social fabric that has held us securely for decades gradually frays, leaving gaps that can never truly be filled. This loss is qualitatively different from others we experience throughout life. When we lose contemporaries, those who shared our generational perspective, who remembered the same cultural touchstones, who knew us in our younger incarnations, we lose something irreplaceable. We lose witnesses to our lives. We lose people who understood us without explanation, who shared a common language and frame of reference, who remembered the world as it was when we were young. For many seniors, the social world literally contracts with each passing year. The Christmas card list grows shorter. The contact list in the phone includes more people who are no longer there to answer. The ritual gatherings that once filled the calendar, the monthly bridge club, the regular golf foursome, the couple's dinner rotation, gradually disappear as members become unable to participate or pass away. I used to have standing plans for nights a week, James recalled. The poker game on Tuesdays, coffee with the retired teachers on Thursdays. Now I can go days without my phone ringing. Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing too, becoming invisible as my connections to the world fade away. This social attrition affects us on multiple levels. Practically, it reduces our support network just when we might need it most. Emotionally, it multiplies our grief, often before we fully process earlier losses. Psychologically, it can shake our sense of continuity and belonging in the world. Each loss reminds us of our own mortality and can trigger profound questions about meaning, legacy, and what remains when so much has been taken. For James, the turning point came after the death of his oldest friend, Richard, with whom he'd shared a friendship spanning 7 decades. At Richard's funeral, I realized I was the only person there who remembered him as a young man. James said his grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew only the elderly version of him. They never saw him play baseball, never heard him sing, never knew what a prankster he was in his 20s. And I thought, who will remember me? Who will carry my stories when I'm gone? This realization led James to what might seem a counterintuitive response. Rather than withdrawing grief, he began deliberately expanding his social world to include people of different ages. He volunteered at the local historical society, where his first-hand knowledge of the town's past made him an invaluable resource. He joined a community garden where his experience with plants was welcomed by younger gardeners. He started recording video stories about his life and times for his family archives. I realized I couldn't replace what was lost, James explained. Those friendships were formed through shared experiences over decades. They're irreplaceable. But I could build something new, different kinds of connections with different kinds of value. This approach, acknowledging the irreplaceable nature of what's lost while creating space for new, different relationships, offers a path through this difficult terrain. It means recognizing that while no new friend will ever know us as our lifelong companions did, new connections can still bring joy, purpose, and meaning to our days. Many seniors find that intergenerational relationships become especially valuable in this phase. Connections with younger people offer fresh perspectives, exposure to new ideas, and opportunities to share wisdom. Mentoring relationships provide purpose and the satisfaction of contributing to others' growth. Family relationships, particularly with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, offer a sense of continuity and legacy beyond our individual lives. Others find meaning in becoming the keepers of memory, the ones who remember those who are gone, who tell their stories, who ensure their essence isn't lost even when their physical presence is. This role as witness and storyteller can transform grief into a sacred responsibility that honors those we've lost while giving purpose to our continuing days. I'm the last one who remembers how my friend Tom could imitate any bird call perfectly, James said with a smile. I'm the only one left who knows how brave my cousin Sarah was during her battle with cancer in the 1970s, when treatments were so much more brutal than they are now. Sharing these memories keeps them alive somehow, makes their lives continue to matter. As we navigate these 3 harsh truths, the changing relationship with our children, the limitations of our aging bodies, and the loss of our contemporaries, certain common threads emerge about finding peace within these realities. These are not easy lessons, but they offer a path toward acceptance that doesn't diminish our dignity or surrender our joy. First, acceptance is not surrender. Many confuse accepting reality with giving up or giving in. True acceptance is simply acknowledging what is, without wasting precious energy fighting against immutable facts. It's recognizing the difference between what we can change and what we cannot, then focusing our limited resources on what remains within our influence. Acceptance creates space for adaptation, rather than trapping us in futile resistance. Second, redefining identity becomes essential. Throughout our lives, we define ourselves largely by our roles and relationships, parent, professional, partner, friend, and by what our bodies could do. As these external markers shift or disappear, we're invited to discover a more essential self that transcends these temporary aspects. Who are we beyond our relationships, beyond our physical capabilities, beyond the social identities we've carried? Answering this question leads many to a deeper, more authentic sense of self that can weather the storms of loss. Third, living truthfully in the present moment becomes both a challenge and a gift. There's a natural tendency to dwell in the past when the present contains pain and the future holds uncertainty. But those who find peace amid these harsh realities often speak of developing a new relationship with time, learning to fully inhabit each moment, appreciating what is rather than longing for what was or fearing what might be. This presence doesn't deny the pain of loss, but keeps it from consuming the life that remains to be lived. Margaret, Robert, and James each faced these harsh truths and found their way to a peace that doesn't deny reality but transcends it. Not a perfect peace without moments of grief or frustration, but a sustainable peace rooted in acceptance and the courage to continue creating meaningful lives within new parameters. As James told me in our last conversation, I never expected this chapter to be easy, but I discovered it can still be beautiful, still be worthwhile, still contain moments of unexpected joy, and perhaps that's enough. Peace doesn't come from having a life without losses. It comes from learning to embrace life with all its imperfections, transitions, and endings. The harsh truths we've explored today, the changing relationships with our children, our body's inevitable decline, the departure of those who shared our history. These aren't the final chapter of your story. They're simply turns in a road that compel you to find new paths. Paths that can lead to a deeper fulfillment that only those who have faced truth can discover. Margaret found that when she released her expectation to remain central in her children's decision-making, she created space for a more authentic relationship to emerge. Robert discovered that honoring his body's journey, instead of fighting against it, brought a different kind of strength. James learned that while he couldn't replace those he'd lost, he could build new connections and become a keeper of precious memories that might otherwise fade away. What binds these journeys together is courage. The courage to see clearly what is, rather than clinging to what was or what should have been. It's this clear vision, this willingness to adapt rather than deny, that opens the door to genuine peace. Not a peace that comes from perfect circumstances, but a deeper peace that can weather any storm because it's built on acceptance of life exactly as it unfolds. If you're struggling with one of these realities today, share your experience in the comment below. When we share our stories of navigating these challenges, we illuminate the path for each other. And if this message has touched your heart, pass it along to someone else walking a similar journey. Because while growing older may indeed reveal harsh truths, it also offers us the wisdom to transform them into something unexpectedly beautiful.